The global economy is a failure and it is being hidden by the mirage. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. There are countless indicators. In fact, I have covered hundreds of different indicators on this channel before showing a decline in the real economy. But of course, that is all being clouded by what the mainstream media and the governments project. But it is my opportunity to bring you the truth. So let's get into this right away. So much to cover in this video that I want to get to. We're looking at Greenspan. This is a bunch of quotes from him from a recent video interview that he did, and you can see here lower long-term rates is not a conundrum. It's an indication of how weak global economic growth is. In fact, he's saying a lot of what I say. Now this is very interesting. Lower long-term rates. We have interest rates at such a low rate for such a long time that it is in fact never been done before. Every time historically a nation brings the interest rates down significantly low like they are right now, they're always ending up with a dislocation and a disconnect in various sectors of the economy, and we see that happening today. Effective demand is extraordinarily weak, tantamount to the late stages of the Great Depression. Once again, something that I've talked about where we have an issue where we're going back to the financial crisis. And he's even talking about issues of the Great Depression. And of course, that is an important issue that we need to bring up, that we need to talk about, because you keep on looking at these indicators and we've already gone back to the financial crisis, or in some cases even worse. So of course, we have to be paying attention to it. And the last point here, monetary policy is not responsible for economic weakness. It's a fiscal issue. I say we need to ignore this information and simply look at these both indicators that the quantitative easing is in fact increasing. At the same time, we have debt accumulation on the personal, actually people's debt is increasing. We have the national debt increasing. We have the unfunded liabilities increasing. And of course, we have the stimulus packages, the bailouts that continuously get put out there every so often. And of course, that burdens the taxpayer further. I'll get into that in a moment. I just wanted to mention about Greenspan first. A lot of people say, how do you give him any credibility? He was the Federal Reserve Chairman for all of those years. Well, for those who are naysayers or won't even look at his information, I would definitely suggest you read his book, Age of Turbulence. This is a very big book and in fact goes through his entire history right on through his Fed Chairman status and beyond. Now, what is very interesting about this book is that it shows from the very beginning Greenspan had very good fundamental analysis. He was much with the Austrian camp, sound money, and then he pretty much sold out in order to become the Fed chairman. So this is very interesting information, the way he changed. However, it's still good to read his book and to understand that he's now going back to his roots in many instances. Would I necessarily trust him? No, but he does have some very good information to share. Let's move on right here. Dollar index versus the S&P earnings estimate. Now, this is just one thing that I wanted to show you here. This is exactly what happens. They always try to match up these different charts, and of course I do like to bring you the charts. It's very good information overall, but we need to understand that there are more important indicators than earnings estimates, than futures contracts, and everything else that is dated further into the future or is something that is not necessarily based on reality. We need to get back to the real. If you can understand what I'm saying by that, let me get into this here. This is a real indicator. The cost of care, healthcare spending per person in selected advanced nations. This is just one example I wanted to show you that, for example, here, US, Canada, Norway, Germany, France, UK, and so on are all experiencing extremely high rates of the cost of care. And at the top of there being the US, of course, paying the most for healthcare, even though their life expectancy is lower, even though they're actually not getting the best care out there, that's for sure, and Obamacare will increase that assuredly. The reason I'm mentioning this is that taxation is increasing on the people, causing a bigger and bigger burden. So let's move on into this. Japan, the Japanese household spending year over year declining month over month over month. We can see a negative on these household spending. Now, why would household spending be down? Well, of course, the people are worried. The people are concerned. They don't have enough of this disposable income where they could buy cars and TVs and big ticket items. They are simply not able to spend the way that they were used to. And this is after the introduction of so-called Abenomics, trillions in yen being printed. Now, of course, that doesn't do anything except keeps the zombie banks alive. I'm going to move on. Japanese jobless rate. You're going to increase the amount of jobless, whether it's Japan or the US or whatever, when you try to manipulate the system and tweak it and twist it. You're just making things work. Look, Abenomics is introduced, they print up some money, and things just get worse. They try to actually impose a tax hike. What does that do? It makes things worse. And of course, nothing they can do will actually improve the economy. They can show any unemployment number, but the fact remains is that these numbers are fraudulent. You can't actually believe it when, for example, in the US, after 1 year, you're just wiped off the statistics. Printing money props up the banking structure. It never once in history helps out the individual. Look at this right here, cash for clunkers. This is from my book here, essentially talking about the program that the US had as a sort of a stimulus to keep the car industry afloat. And of course, didn't help the fact that they took the bailout money and ran to open up factories in China and Brazil. But right here, Cash for Clunkers was a $3 billion taxpayer-funded program. They took money from you as an individual and they put it into another sector, and that doesn't do anything to help the economy. This is the failure of governments right here. So I'm going to move on quickly, talking about what's happening in Greece right now, obviously being one of the hottest topics of 2015. Right now, they're in trouble. Greece is due to pay the 1.6 billion euro next month. Athens might ask to delay this payment for 2 months. Why would they do this? They simply don't have the funds to do so. They are really redlining right now, and they are in for a world of hurt if they cannot pay up. What will happen to them? I simply don't think that they'll be kicked out of the EU, because they should have been included in the first place. The EU structure itself is terrible because you cannot have one interest rate and one currency controlling all of these diverse nations. You can have agreements between nations. You can have trade. You do not need to be an isolationist, as some call certain people. But of course, all you need to do is simply have agreements with each other, shake hands, make these pacts between each other. You don't need to have these treaties that get put really beyond that, and they become laws, and then they become unions, as with the European Union. And you can see how it is really, really hurting Greece right now, especially. And this is years, many, many years after the introduction of this European Union. And this right here is really a pixelated image, so you might have to click on it yourself. The information is out of Keep Talking Greece, and essentially we're looking at the first of the anti-government riots that are taking place. But of course, this reminds me of a few years ago, and I covered it here on the channel, where we have the riots in Greece, whether it's for anti-government, whether it's for any other sort of protest. We see how bad things can get in an instant, and we go from a prosperous nation to one of chaos, of civil unrest. It can happen rapidly. That's all I wanted to show with this. Now, this right here was so shocking to me. I needed to read it 3 times over. I'll spare you with just once. He said this. This is Obama. So, in the short term, if Mr. McConnell, the leader of the Senate, and the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, want, and I said that on purpose, want to have a vote on whether what I'm doing is legal or not, they can have that vote. I will veto that vote because I'm absolutely confident that what we're doing is the right thing to do. This is simply nothing but a dictator speaking. He's saying that if you don't pass the laws that I want to, I'll just write them up and create them on my own. If you create laws that I don't like, I'm going to veto them as well. And this right here is criminal. He said this, that he expanded my authorities. They did not break any laws. What we've done is we've expanded my authorities under the executive action, which is illegal, and prosecutorial discretion as far as we can legally under the existing statute, the existing law. Then he goes on. You can read this for yourself. I'm really amazed by this right here. I can barely even talk about it, but this is what happens when you have a lawless government in control. The people in the Congress and the Senate and others, individual in the lower levels, don't do anything to stop this from happening. They will not speak up other than a little bit of rattling, saber rattling out there, and there's not too much, a little dogs yapping in the background. That's pretty much all I'm hearing on this regard. Look at this. U.S. military vehicles paraded 300 yards from the Russian border. This is getting very, very heated. This is out of the Washington Post. And what we have is an escalation of what is happening in the Ukraine. Our money is being used to fund the wars, to fund all sorts of military-industrial complex schemes that are being created and expanded every single day. And instead of actually trying to fix the economy, they simply pump more and more money into this destruction, this chaos that is being caused. And people think that the American military is declining right now. Look at how many contractors there are in the U.S. military. Look at the other hidden army, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the Taliban. If you include all those fighters that are receiving the funding and the weapons, we have a lot more people on there than you actually think. This is what I wanted to tie in at the end here. Jihadi John, Islamic State killer, is identified as Londoner Mohammed M. Wazi. So this individual here, you can watch the video for yourself. Essentially, they have predicted who exactly this individual is. We'll see how that affects the next video, if it does at all, what will happen there. But I just find it a little interesting, I'm proceeding with caution, let's just say, of this right here, because they're sort of setting it up like it's a storyline, like it's a movie, and we know where the funding is coming from. Everything is just finding its way pieced together. And does it really matter who this one single individual is? They always put this one individual and have him up at the top and try to have everyone's focus on that, whether it's bin Laden, whether it was the number 2 individual, whether it's Saddam Hussein, whether it's Gaddafi, whether it's any of these individuals that you see. It doesn't matter because the problem itself is coming from the funding. We are consistently funding the enemy. Then we drop bombs on the enemy, and it's a perpetual cycle of warfare. It is a failed process for us, but of course it's successful for the military-industrial complex and those who need to keep the fear in the people so that we are in fact subdued. Now, if you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up. And I want to say hello to all the new subscribers, particularly if you came over from the SGT report interview that I just did. I want to say hello to everyone out there, all the new subscribers. We just crossed through 17,000 subscribers. So of course, we want to continue on with this fight to bring out the truth out there. That is the most important thing beyond all else. And of course, if you want the best intel for free that is available at themoneygps.com, you just scroll down to the bottom, fill in your email address, and you get occasional emails from me with good, short, concise info.